Happy Easter, everybody! Once again, to give out his personal thoughts with this review, I've got with me my good friend, Splendid Red Engine 5. Say hello to the people, Jeremy.
Thanks, Day. And hello, viewers. I'm very excited for this review since Percy's Chocolate Crunch was one of my childhood favorites growing up.
So for this review, given that it's Easter, what better tape to review than Percy's Chocolate Crunch? So let's not waste any time and get on with the history. Percy's Chocolate Crunch and Other Thomas Adventures was first released on VHS and DVD on February 25, 2003 by Anchor Bay Entertainment. For some DVDs, this was another where you could get a bonus CD sampler with 4 different tracks, but it is also one of the more uncommon ones to find. This DVD was also released between the years of 2004 and 2006 with a slim case, as well as one of 3 releases on one Totally Thomas pack. Also, Chocolate Crunch did the same as the Salty Secret VHS, where there were some copies that came with a cassette sampler that also provided 4 tracks. Again, these are pretty difficult to find. Also to mention, back in '03, there was a prototype cover, and as you can see, it is very different compared to what they released. There's no shot from Gordon Takes a Tumble, and the words Chocolate Crunch are yellow instead of the brown-colored text. And again, like every release, Chocolate Crunch had a small variety of train packs between the VHS and DVDs. Then, sometime in 2009, Lionsgate had released Chocolate Crunch on DVD once again, and it was re-released again, but with a different art style cover. The same tactic used for the Harvey to the Rescue DVD, as well as many others. And of course, you can also find this either with a regular or a chocolate-covered wooden railway Percy. Anything you'd like to add on, Jeremy?
I don't remember exactly when or where I got this release, but it was more than likely a present for me sometime in late 2007, early 2008. I owned the original 2003 DVD with its booklet, and sometime down the path of my preteen years, I got the VHS copy. That eventually got replaced since a lot of my tapes were sold from childhood. But with all that being said, what are my thoughts on this release? Does it hold up as well as I remember? Well, let's find out together, Tay.
Alright, so that does it for the history. Now it's time to look at our episodes. So Percy's Chocolate Crunch features 6 stories and a bonus music video. Percy's Chocolate Crunch, Thomas Percy and the Squeak, Gordon Takes a Tumble, Buffer Bother, Middle Engine, and Faulty Whistles. So let's start things off with our first episode, Percy's Chocolate Crunch. Percy often has dirty work and likes to be clean like any other engine, but when he tries to deliver sugar to the chocolate factory, an oily piece of track sends him crashing through the factory all coated in chocolate. Right off the bat, this episode is so much fun. It's exciting and it's hilarious. Probably the most well-deserved, talked about episode from Season 6. Because this episode is so iconic amongst the fans, it's no wonder that this episode produced a lot of merchandise. I personally don't remember owning any of these pieces, but I can tell you the one that I do currently own is the original chocolate-covered Trackmaster Percy, which is a pretty cool model. And also, again, being that this is so iconic, in Thomasland, Japan, there is a model replica of the Chocolate Crunch Percy, and it looks badass! But anyways, I feel so bad for Percy throughout this whole story. All he wants to do is to be clean, and he keeps getting no-you'd by every little thing. From coal dust to cinders and ashes, and topping it all off coated in chocolate. This poor guy. And also, I gotta bring this up, I still hope to God no one was in that factory when Percy crashed. Maybe that wasn't exactly chocolate flying out of the windows. In any case, I've always enjoyed this episode so much from childhood, and it still remains as one of my very personal favorite stories from Season 6, as well as my second favorite Percy story. 10 out of 10. What do you have to say, Jeremy?
This is one of the most iconic episodes of the whole show. It's so popular that there was even a ton of merchandise, one of which that I owned as a child was the Trackmaster Percy's Chocolate Crunch with the chocolate syrup tanker. Man, I love that thing. But back to the episode. I frickin' love it. Seeing Percy very dirty throughout the whole episode was definitely a nice build-up to where he was going for down the track. Of course, that being the crash. You gotta feel pretty bad for Percy here since he busted his ass all day and gets more and more dirty and crashes into a chocolate factory to get the most dirty he's ever been. That's quite a lot for the little green engine. When he does crash into the chocolate factory, it makes you laugh since he does look good enough to eat, as Thomas stated near the end of the episode.
Chocolate, chocolate.
But it also makes me wonder, was anyone working in that factory that day? What if someone got hurt? Well, looks like Willy Wonka and his Oompa Loompas ain't giving out any golden tickets. Aww. This episode may seem very silly, but that's why I love it so much. It has a lot of funny moments, the crash is awesome, and Percy gets what he wants at the end, a washdown and a new coat of paint. We can all agree that this episode has a lot of enjoyment, and is one of the most iconic, not only in Season 6, but the series as a whole. I rate it a 10 out of 10.
Our second episode is Thomas, Percy, and the Squeak. Thomas is chosen to take the famous singer Alicia Body to an upcoming concert, but a curious Squeak has everyone concerned, only to find out that a mouse has hopped on board, which terrifies Miss Body. For starters, I was kind of okay with this episode, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that this was another of the many episodes that did freak me out as a kid. Literally because of Alicia Body. I hated her close-up and that ear-piercing scream. That face gave me nightmares for months. Anyways, for a story, when I watch it now, it's just kind of meh. It's a bit boring and nothing too exciting really happens here. The one part that does get me is, why does SDH go through all this trouble for a mouse in the end? Seriously? And this also isn't really saying much, but the one thing I do actually find funny is Baldwin's voice for Miss Body. Somehow, it just works.
Look at the little green engine, Alicia Body exclaimed. So sweet and dirty, like a proper steam engine.
Also, I love how in the UK dub, Gordon and Percy have this funny little moment at the docks.
Look at the little green engine. So sweet and dirty, like a proper steam engine. Peasant. Yes, I am pleasant.
I'm as puzzled as everyone else as to why they changed that little bit of dialogue. It really does show how much the US dub is really oversensitive with the little things. Other than that, this episode just doesn't do anything for me anymore. Not saying I hate it, but I can easily do without it. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. What do you think, Jeremy?
Now, this episode is kind of a mixed bag for me. Yeah, the way that the story is written is not very memorable, and not even very exciting, and it's quite boring, but I always kind of liked it as a kid. As I rewatched it, it's not really all that great. I'm honestly not too sure how I feel about this particular story. This is just another story where Thomas wants to show off and be a dick to Percy once again because he has to be squeaky clean. By the way, that word, squeaky clean, is used so many times to where I feel like it's just a way of adding that word for the plot of the episode. Well, one of the main characters being the mouse. Plus, is it just me? Or when Baldwin says that line, it just sounds very off.
But I have to be squeaky clean, Huff Thomas.
What is wrong with just using the word clean or very clean or something like that anyway? I do love the music in this episode. The opening introduction sounds very orchestral, and the chorus of Alicia Body at the end just sounds very nice, in my personal opinion. I do truly believe that Season 6 had some very underrated music, like I stated in my Snowy Surprise review. Which, by the way, you should go watch if you haven't already. Another thing I'll add is I did chuckle quite a few times while watching it. I love the Dirty Percy gag in this episode. I mean, come on, we all know that iconic meme.
Don't call me Dirty Percy.
The UK dub was so much better in my opinion though. Hell, Angelus's Season 6 dub was probably the best he's done in the whole series. As we all know, Baldwin was really declining in Season 6. That doesn't make the episode lower for that reason, it's just something I usually like to bring up. But one thing I didn't understand was why did the US dub remove this particular dialogue when Percy arrived at the docks? The UK dub made this part funny, but the US dub doesn't make any sense and doesn't even try to make it funny at all.
Peasant, Gordon huffs snootily. Yes, I am pleasant, smiled Percy.
But he's filthy, Gordon huffed snootily. But I clean up nice, smiled Percy.
I also found it funny when Alicia Body screamed by seeing that mouse and broke all the windows all over town, and Gordon saying his iconic line, "Definitely a coloratura."
She screamed so loud and so long that windows broke all over town. Definitely a coloratura.
Man, that scream can get so annoying after a while. I highly doubt anyone would scream that long after seeing a mouse. But the episode as a whole is just... It does have its funny moments, and the music is very nice as usual. But like I stated before, it's not all that exciting. The story itself seems like it'd be from the hit era, and it's not all that memorable. I don't hate this episode at all, but I'll just say it's decent at most. I'll rate this one a 6.5 out of 10.
Next up we have Gordon Takes a Tumble. Gordon thinks he's too dignified to do any other job, which Salty enjoys teasing him about. He is then chosen to take a long line of freight cars, but also ignores a go slow sign, which in turn sends him flying off the rails on a wild ride. Now, as a kid, I did kind of like this episode too, but as time went on, it unfortunately became another of my least favorite Gordon episodes. I kind of like it a bit more now after rewatching it a few more times, so I'm not saying it's bad, because it's not. Because let's be real, the best thing about this episode is the insanely over-the-top crash. This crash is so unbelievably nuts, it keeps you glued to the screen practically. I'm just so surprised that Gordon's fireman and driver were not seriously hurt and all they end up in is a pile of mud. Leading up to all this, it was still a dumb decision on his part, but it's Gordon. What do you expect? Again, not really a favorite of mine personally, but it's far from being a bad episode. I don't really have anything else to say other than I rank it an 8 out of 10. Your thoughts, Jeremy?
This is probably a fan favorite for many people among Season 6, and it definitely shows. Gordon is trying to show how important he is when Sir Topham Hatt asked him to take a goods train. Right off the bat, I love how different this episode is. Gordon hardly ever pulls freight trains. I think the last time he did it was in Season 1, but I'm just going to go based on memory. It's still not too often that you see him pulling cars or trucks. So as Gordon is crossed for having to pull this train and showing off the Salty from all his teasing, the stupid signalman sleeping on his job, and Gordon goes off the old branch line. Now, what is up with the signalman always sleeping on the job? Sure, it's funny at some points, but man, what a dumbass. Though it was technically his fault for not putting Gordon on the right line, Gordon still chose not to go slow, so he kinda had it coming for falling off the track. Which, by the way, this is one of the best crashes of all time in the show. Gordon falls off the track into a field as the cars are flipping everywhere, and he just keeps crashing into things. I used to laugh every single time I watched this part because he literally lost his tender after hitting some tires. It's just too good. I don't understand how the driver and fireman were fine after falling off the hill and bouncing on the ground, but it's still a kid's show, so they can't really have them be dead. Overall, this is a great episode, with some funny moments, a great crash, and is loved by a lot of fans. I wouldn't say it's the best Season 6 story, but it still makes up for one of the best. I give it a 10 out of 10.
And our next episode is Buffer Bother. Bill is jealous when Ben is sent off to get some brand new buffers. But no matter how hard he tries, Bill complains that he too wants brand new buffers just like his twin, but a crash soon gives Bill more than what he wished for. Okay, this might just be me, but I honestly don't get the hate for this episode. I actually quite like this one. I know it's very similar to the episode Twin Trouble, but tweaked just a little. In all honesty, if I really had to pick either, I'd choose this one. This bickering side of Bill and Ben can come off as a bit irritating, because they're literally arguing over buffers, which is a bit silly.
Well, I should get new buffers too, Bill complained. We're twins, we do everything together. But you don't need new buffers. You're only getting new buffers because you're so clumsy. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are.
Then again, this is a plotline that has been used so many times in other kids' shows that basically it was gonna happen at some point, I think. A few parts that never fail to make me chuckle are when Bill gets this pole-looking thing in his funnel and when he wishes soot on Mavis. Plus, Baldwin's voice is actually hilarious at that particular part.
Shit! Bill!
There is one thing that does confuse me, and that's how they sent Ben for these brand new buffers, but they're never seen again after this episode. What was the point of doing that then? That was such a waste of time. Had they kept them, Bill and Ben would have actually looked badass with shiny buffers. But anyways, I kind of see where people are coming from with this episode being annoying, but oddly enough, I can still watch it. Don't ask me how, I just do. This episode may not be my favorite Bill and Ben story, but I still like it to an extent, and I can at least tolerate it over some other Season 6 episodes. I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts, Jeremy?
Oh boy. Don't get me wrong, I love Bill and Ben. They're some of my favorite characters. But why does this episode have to be a thing? Like, it's tolerable for me and I can still watch it, but it's also very annoying since it's literally just Bill complaining about Ben getting new buffers and how it's not fair. Like, please stop. I know Bill and Ben bicker, but not in this kind of manner. It's also just a very boring episode since nothing exciting or really interesting happens. There's like 2 funny moments in this episode and that's about it. Those being when Bill gets a pole or some sort of stick in his funnel and sneezes it out, and when he wishes soot all over Mavis. There's nothing else great about this episode. Bill honestly deserved his little crash. Or maybe he doesn't since he gets new buffers now? There was no point of this episode being a thing in a way, since when Ben got his shiny new buffers, you never saw them again. Talk about a waste of time. If his buffers are damaged and you have him new ones, why did you give him some shiny golden buffers? Man, this episode is way more frustrating than I remember. I used to love this story, but my small ass brain didn't really know any better. There's literally nothing much else here to say, except this episode's just boring, it's annoying, and the ending isn't really even that good. It's literally just them saying sorry. One of the weaker Season 6 stories in my opinion. I'm rating it a 4 out of 10.
Up next is Middle Engine. Percy becomes a middle engine due to Ari and Bert's tricks. This causes him to be pushed onto the coal ramp when he is bumped by Henry. James thinks he can't be fooled by the Diesels, but is soon caught in the middle himself. So now we come to the most controversial episodes of Season 6. I know there are a majority of fans that don't like this episode for a number of the same reasons. I know the episode has its flaws, like SDH blaming Percy for something completely out of his control, hence why I hate him in the model series, Henry not paying the attention, Ari and Bert not being reprimanded in any way, shape, or form after what they caused to both Percy and James. I even get that some might not even be fans of Baldwin's narration. I get it. However, with all that in mind, do I personally think this is a bad episode? This is going to sound really crazy to everyone, but I say no. As a kid, I really liked this episode, and I still do. Now, I'm not saying it's a fantastic episode, because it's far from it. I'm not even saying that it's worth top 10 material. I'm just simply okay with it. Sure, the reasons I mentioned do irritate me too, but personally, I don't let that ruin the episode for me. Especially with Baldwin's bland narration, which I'm going against the majority again. While some think this is Baldwin's weakest episode, I don't think this is his worst, because I think there's one that's even far more worse than this. And no, I'm not talking about Jack Frost. You'll know it when I get to it. But in reality, there really are far worse episodes than this. It's fine if you don't like it for whatever reasons you may have. I'm just saying that I'm okay with it to an extent, and it's enough for me to rank it a 6.5 out of 10. Your thoughts, Jeremy?
Well, we kick in with the worst Season 6 episode not only on this release, but as the season as a whole. Now, I will admit by saying that I did like this episode when I was younger, and I even have a very clear memory of seeing this episode play when I was 4 years old at the Day Out with Thomas event at Greenfield Village in Michigan, while I was in one of the tents playing with the toys. But even as a kid, this was probably my least favorite story on this release, and it still is. But it's aged badly, and I'm sure almost everyone could agree that this is the worst episode in this season. The only highlights is when Percy gets pushed onto the tipper's loading ramp, but it somewhat gets ruined when the yard manager blames Percy and tells Sir Topham Hatt, which he gets upset with Percy. Percy even admits that it was Harry and Bert and it wasn't even his fault, but Fat Hat just is like, I don't give a and punishes Percy still. Hell, he should be upset at Henry since he was the reason Percy was pushed on the damn thing, and Percy's driver and fireman left for no reason whatsoever. Also, this episode is edited so poorly, and I'm mainly talking about the US dub. Does anyone else notice Baldwin saying Cole in the same exact tone every time? What was the point of that? I even made a video on my channel where I just edited out all the Cole phrases, and it just sounds so much better. Even then, this episode is still edited so badly. There's shots that were filmed much later that ended up being used in the beginning, a few slow-mo shots for whatever reason, and it's not even a very appealing episode at all. Like, how the hell is this supposed to be at the smelter's yard? And this episode plot is just so boring. A middle engine? That totally sounds amazing, right? I do like how James is in this episode and tries to stand up for himself against Harry and Bert, but why does Percy come back to help him to pull the train? And also, why does this episode end with James being teased? Harry and Bert deserve to get punished, not Percy. And why does James? I mean, I know James was somewhat trying to show off in a way, but he really didn't deserve to be teased. Overall, this episode is a mess, unenjoyable, boring, confusing, not concluded, unappealing, badly edited, badly written, just bad as a whole. I can still sit through it, but this is still a very bad episode. This is my worst rating by far, a 3 out of 10. Its only highlights being the great music score and Percy's incident with the tipper's loading ramp.
And now our final episode is Faulty Whistles. Peter Sam's funnel gets knocked loose when delivering some cars over to Duncan. Duncan continuously tries to show off his whistle until he blows it off. To continue on, the headmaster plays the organ as if it's a whistle. For one, I love how this is a play on the plotline of the original Railway series story, Mike's Whistle, which, admittingly, I did not read as a kid, even though I did own the big book of all the original stories. In terms of the story, this one is kind of funny. I love how Duncan puffs on doing his jobs as the headmaster plays the organ like a whistle, and each time the note changes. Again, very similar to what happens in Mike's Whistle. There's just one question I have that always bothered me just a little bit. Alec, what happened to the Scottish accent for Duncan? Where did this gruff-sounding voice for him come from? Why are you constantly changing voices? Give us this voice back!
Fancy not securing your freight cars on a hill. They'll come back to spook you and your special funnel. Woo!
One clever thing that I really do admire towards the ending of the episode was how Mike and Junior composed a little ditty of She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain on the organ. That sort of throws in a small fun element to end off the episode. say it's a pretty fun and enjoyable episode, and it's a pretty decent way to end off the tape. 8 out of 10. What do you think about this episode, Jeremy?
Here we are, the final Season 6 episode on this release, and overall the last Season 6 episode. Honestly, for the last episode, it's not as conclusive or even forgettable at times, since I hardly hear anyone talk about this particular story. And it's a shame, since this is a pretty good one. I love how it's focused on Duncan, since he's my personal favorite Narrowgauge character, and him showing off as he always does. Though it may seem a bit repetitive because we saw stories like this before, and even then this was an exception, since Duncan had what he had deserved. That being when he loses his whistle. I always found it funny when the whistle just flies in the air and just disappears. For all we know, it's probably still rusting somewhere. But anyways, since Duncan loses his whistle, the headmaster has to use his organ as a whistle for Duncan. This is actually a pretty creative idea, since they could have just sat there, other engines could have took his place, and Duncan would just learn a lesson. That's how the episode could have ended. But it didn't. I will say, I love the bit where the headmaster plays the organ while Duncan is puffing back home. The shots are very nice, the music is fantastic, and it oddly makes me smile. The ending isn't perfect by all means, since it doesn't make Season 6 really feel conclusive, and it seems kind of cliche where Duncan just grins. But it is a very nice story, with some funny moments here and there, and it's a pretty nice episode to end the tape. I give it a 9 out of 10.
And now to wrap up this tape is our bonus song, Little Engines. As I previously mentioned, this song is my third favorite on my top 10 favorite classic songs. The instrumental for this is such a catchy earworm. I still like how it sounds like a march dedication to all the little engines on Sodor. I can remember when I first heard this song on this tape, and I would listen to it over and over again. Surprised how I didn't wear out my tape. Even so, I still don't think this is better than Mike O'Donnell's version, but it is definitely one of the best and catchiest songs from Season 6. What do you think about it, Jeremy?
Now, if you remember from the Snowy Surprise review, I stated that Winter Wonderland was my favorite Season 6 song. I don't know what the hell I was thinking in that review, but it's not my favorite Season 6 song. It's not even one of my favorites from the classic series, for that matter. It's still a great one nonetheless, though. But this song is one of my favorites, no doubt. Probably in my top 5 favorites. It's either between this and James the Really Splendid Engine as my favorite Season 6 song. The song has a great message about how little engines can do big things, which was stated in Magic Railroad, but I still absolutely adore this song. It's such a strong song, and it can even make people feel good about themselves too. You don't have to be super strong or really big to accomplish everything, because sometimes being smaller than others can be useful too. I truly love how it's such a jingly song where it starts off very slow, and then it gets more out there and seems more confident in the lyrics. Now, I will admit that I love Mike O'Donnell's version of this song slightly more than the original version on this release. His voice is so soothing, and it does sound great to hear his voice in the song than the kids. But as I stated, I really love this song, and this will always be one of my favorites in childhood and adulthood. A great way to end the tape.
So what do we both think about this tape? Jeremy, your thoughts?
Now, I definitely had some different opinions on the episodes as I got older, but it's still surprisingly a very good release. It has a mix of boring or bad episodes and great or fun episodes. That may not seem like a great thing, but it's oddly unique in a sense. I wouldn't say it's the best Season 6 release, but I still love it, despite half the stories being okay or not that great. Plus, it holds a lot of memories for me. I'd personally recommend it. Some people may even like some of the stories on here that I didn't even find all that great. I know for a fact I loved them as a kid. It's a must-own for Thomas collectors for sure, even if it's just for that amazing cover.
Well, funny enough, the first time I ever watched this tape was actually on Easter back in 2003. Everything about this tape got me so hyped because I didn't know what to expect next. Now, as I got older, obviously some of my opinions have changed for certain episodes, and when really analyzing it, the tape does have a mixed bag of either good or meh episodes. But I still really like this tape because of how unique it is. It's actually my second favorite Season 6 release, right next to Salty Secret. It's definitely not the best release from this season, but there's a lot of personal childhood memories that I have growing up with it. I'd only recommend it to those who can actually sit through some of the episodes on here, and if you're comfortable with bland sounding narration. For those who can't, just watch them on YouTube or just look at the UK dub. Be my guest, whatever you decide. And that concludes this review. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and thank you Jeremy once again for joining me on this review.
I'd like to thank Taylor for allowing me to do this collab once again. These are a lot of fun, and though this one was definitely different because I was a bit more biased on the stories, this was still a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to not only possibly being in more collaborations in the future, but seeing more of these VHS reviews of hers. If you haven't already, please go subscribe to her channel, and if you want to, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. I recently surpassed 200 subscribers, so for the people that are on here and actually subscribe to me, I genuinely appreciate it. But that about wraps it for my side of the review, and I'll let Tay take it over from here.
As such, I will leave a link in the description to Jeremy's channel and a link to my playlist of all previously done reviews. So, what is my next review going to be on? Well, I haven't given this narrator the light of day yet, so how about we tackle some stories from some of Thomas's new friends? See you all next time!